Half Dome is one of the most photographed spots anywhere in Yosemite National Park. It sat in the background of countless selfies, family vacation photos, and even Ansel Adams' most famous frame. But the mountain is also the endpoint for one of the most dramatic and potentially dangerous hikes in the entire country. You see, the final 400 feet of the 7-mile hike to its summit isn't really a trail. It's a featureless slab of granite pitched as steep as 60 degrees. And the only thing between hikers and open air is 2 steel cables that were bolted into the rock in 1919. And it's this spot right here that has caused some of the most horrific and heartbreaking tragedies in the park's history. In fact, this was getting so bad that the National Park Service had to cap the whole route at 300 permits a day and screen hikers at a checkpoint before they ever touched the cables. But even after introducing these safety measures in 2010, the number of incidents effectively doubled over the following decade. In this video, we're about to break down every step of the Half Dome Trail and show you exactly what keeps going wrong and why, despite one of the strictest permit systems in the entire national park system, people continue to run into trouble on this mountain. But before we get to the current state of this famous hike, let's quickly go back to where it all began. In 1875, the summit of Half Dome was considered unreachable, or at least it was until a sailor named George Anderson drilled a line of iron eye bolts straight into the granite, becoming the first person to stand on its summit. 45 years after that, the Sierra Club replaced his bolts with steel cables, turning a technical climb into something ordinary hikers could attempt. The route has been rebuilt twice since in 1934 and again in 1984, without changing its basic design. Today, the cable corridor runs about 600 feet up the dome's east face. 2 parallel steel cables, roughly 3/8 of an inch thick, run waist high on 68 pairs of metal stanchions. Wooden planks are laid every 10 to 15 feet, so hikers have somewhere to gain some traction. In 2012, the whole system was added to the National Register of Historic Places. And that sounds like an honor, but it functions more like a legal anchor. Any redesign now has to survive a review process built for preserving history, not for re-engineering a challenging mountain ascent. Roughly 50,000 people use those cables in an average year. But even before you get there, you have the pleasure of enjoying one of the most sought-after day hikes in the entire national park system. Most hikers start at the Happy Isles trailhead on the Yosemite Valley floor at around 4,000 feet. The first 1 mile is paved, climbing gently to the Vernal Fall footbridge, which holds the last drinking fountain anyone will see all day. Past that bridge, the Mist Trail earns its name. Roughly 600 granite steps climb alongside the 317-foot Vernal Fall, and the spray coming off it soaks both the hikers and the stone they're standing on. Another set of steps carries you past Nevada Fall, nearly twice as tall at 594 feet. Above the falls, the trail flattens into Little Yosemite Valley, a sandy, pine-shaded stretch beside the Merced River that marks roughly the halfway point. It's also the last easy walking of the day. From there, the trail turns north and climbs steadily through forest toward Half Dome's eastern shoulder, where a ranger checks permits before anyone goes further. Then comes the subdome, a set of steep granite switchbacks and cut steps, fully exposed, with no cables and no shade. Most hikers rate this section as frightening as the cables themselves. Only after all of that do you reach the base of the cable route, at roughly 8,400 feet, around 8 miles, and 4,400 vertical feet from where you parked. The round trip runs 14 to 16 miles with about 4,800 feet of elevation gain and takes most people 10 to 12 hours. It's demanding enough on its own that, by the Park Service's own account, rangers have to assist hundreds of people on the Half Dome Trail every single summer, with an estimated 20% summit success rate for any given attempt. And the most taxing part, and primary cause of most accidents, isn't the mileage, it's the last 400 feet. Now, the vast majority of the hikers that ascend the cables do so with very little trouble. But for those who don't, it's often due to multiple factors that combine to create a deadly concoction of heightened dangers. Of course, the slope itself is already working against a hiker's traction. Across the steepest sections of Half Dome, the angle runs past 45 degrees, and in places closer to 56. What actually turns that cable corridor lethal is friction, or the sudden lack of it. An estimated 50,000 hikers a year have already polished the cable corridor smooth, wearing away the roughness that used to give boots something to bite into. Yet for most hikers, on a dry day, polished granite paired with sticky rubber hiking soles offers sufficient grip. But when water is added to this already challenging terrain, that's when most fatal accidents have occurred. A few minutes of rain or hail can drop the granite's grip low enough that it behaves like wet ice underfoot. And it doesn't take a downpour to do it either. A thin sheet of surface water is enough to erase what grip is left. The moment rain hits Half Dome's cable section, every hiker on it is standing on a steep, wet slope, holding a steel cable with hands that are about to start losing their grip too. And there's no shortcut off the corridor once you're in it. The only way down is the same wet, crowded cables you climbed up. And being caught on the crowded cables in bad weather is exactly what killed Grace Roloff in July 2024. She was a 20-year-old Arizona State University student who had driven 10 hours from Phoenix with her father under a forecast predicting only a slim chance of rain. And although they summited with time to spare, within minutes of reaching the top, a black cloud rolled in and thunder sent them scrambling for the cables. Stuck behind slower hikers she couldn't pass, Roloff felt her shoes lose their grip and slid past her father's outstretched hand, falling 300 feet. The coroner later confirmed she died instantly from a head injury. And sadly, this is far from the only time weather has worked against capable hikers on this mountain. In June 2009, Manoj Kumar, a 40-year-old hiker from San Ramon, was descending those same cables when hail began to fall. He lost his footing about 100 feet from the top and fell to his death in front of dozens of witnesses. That same storm left 41 other hikers stranded on the summit, too frightened of the slick granite to move. Rangers needed hours to bring them down one at a time. Zoom out from any single case, and the pattern holds. Since the cables went in, Yosemite has confirmed at least 25 accidental deaths on the cable section and summit. Count the wider route up to Half Dome, including terrain lower down, and that total climbs past 40. Nearly every name on that list follows the same script. Dry morning, crowded cables, and a storm that arrives faster than anyone expected. But the same weather system that turns the cables to a fatal slipping hazard has claimed lives in other unsuspecting ways. Through the Sierra Nevada summer months, solar heating on the valley's granite walls sends warm, moist air rising fast enough to build a full thunderstorm in 15 to 30 minutes. A clear morning at the trailhead tells hikers almost nothing about what's waiting 8 miles and 4,800 vertical feet later. On July 27, 1985, 5 hikers reached the summit as one of those storms rolled in and did what feels like the obvious move. They took shelter in a shallow rock enclosure near the top. While it sounds like a logical choice, it was actually a fatal mistake. Lightning traveling down wet vertical granite will jump the gap between a cave ceiling and its floor, and anyone sitting inside becomes the path of least resistance. A bolt struck the enclosure, killing 16-year-old Brian Jordan instantly. 25-year-old Robert Frith was hit in the head, went into convulsions, and rolled off the summit, falling roughly 1,800 feet. The other 3 hikers survived with severe burns that required a nighttime helicopter rescue, the first ever attempted on Half Dome's summit, and months of surgery to save their legs. Park guidance since has been unambiguous. Never shelter under an overhang on exposed granite during a storm. Get low, stay away from anything metal, and put distance between yourself and the highest point around. But it isn't only the weather that potentially makes this hike dangerous. It's also how many people try to use it at once, or so the Park Service assumed. Before 2010, more than 1,000 hikers could be on the cables on a single weekend day, backed up shoulder to shoulder on a slope where one person's fall could take others down with them. So the Park Service introduced a permit system, capping daily access at exactly 300 people, 225 day hikers, and 75 backpackers, distributed mostly through a preseason lottery. But researchers at UC San Francisco later checked whether it worked. A study published in Wilderness and Environmental Medicine compared search and rescue data from the 5 years before the permit system against the 5 years after. Unsurprisingly, after the permit system, hiker traffic in that zone dropped by as much as 66%, but the numbers that mattered didn't budge. There were 85 rescue incidents before the permits and 54 after, while there were 134 total victims before and 156 after. Confirmed deaths dropped only from 8 to 4, a difference researchers found statistically insignificant. More interestingly, rescues, specifically inside the cable and summit zone, actually rose from 21% of all incidents to 36%. Fewer hikers were making the climb, and the ones who did were, if anything, slightly more likely to end up needing rescue. The study's authors point to a psychological cost baked into the permit system itself: summit fever. Landing a half-dome permit through the preseason lottery can succeed as rarely as 2% of the time for weekend dates in peak season. Every permit holder has already beaten long odds before taking a single step. Add a long drive, a pre-dawn start, and 7 miles of uphill hiking just to reach the base of the cables, and turning back suddenly starts to feel like losing an opportunity. On top of that, the researchers also suggested that there was a psychological safety cushion associated with the permit system. A ranger stationed at the base checks permits before anyone touches the cables, and that checkpoint quietly reinforces the wrong lesson. If the park let me get this far, the park must think it's safe today. The obvious answer to all this is, why not just implement a via ferrata system? Infrastructure like this is extremely common across European mountains. Climbers use harnesses and tethers on terrain far more exposed than half-dome. But the simple reason why this has never been implemented is that the cable system was never engineered to be a true via ferrata, and retrofitting one onto it creates its own problems. A real via ferrata anchors climbers to short cable segments bolted every few feet. So a fall only travels a short distance before a carabiner catches an anchor built to hold that force. Half-dome support poles are spaced 10 to 15 feet apart and were never designed to arrest a fall at all. In fact, they're just notched water pipes resting in shallow 5-inch holes, built only to hold the cable's own weight off the rock. A hiker who slips while clipped to a static sling can generate a shock load heavy enough to shear a pole or pull it clean out of the granite, potentially taking the whole section down with everyone attached to it. Legal exposure compounds the engineering problem. If the park started renting or endorsing safety gear, it would be taking on direct liability for that gear's failure. And since Half Dome's cables have sat on the National Register of Historic Places since 2012, any structural redesign has to survive a review process built to preserve history, not re-engineer a mountain. Now, if you're lucky enough to secure a permit, there are a few things you'll want to keep in mind. Most of what protects hikers on Half Dome happens before they ever touch the cables. Rangers recommend starting from the valley floor between 4 and 6 in the morning, with a hard rule to be off the summit and heading down by 11 in the morning, well before the early afternoon window when Sierra thunderstorms are most likely to build. Footwear matters more than most people expect. Smooth, soled sneakers offer almost nothing on polished granite, while sticky rubber approach shoes hold onto the small friction advantage the mechanism depends on. Heavy-duty work gloves help too, since bare hands on cold, wet steel lose their grip fast. If thunder is audible anywhere nearby, the guidance is simple. Turn around immediately, cables or no cables. On the rock itself, keeping 3 points of contact at all times, 2 hands and a foot, or 2 feet and a hand, is the single habit that prevents most slips before they start. Descending backward, facing the rock, lowers your center of gravity and gives you a stronger pull on the cable if your feet do go. And if caught on the exposed summit during a strike, the survival move is the opposite of instinct. Never shelter under an overhang. Get low on any insulating layer available. Keep your feet pressed together and put distance between yourself and anyone else in your group. None of it requires technical climbing skill. It requires respecting a forecast and being willing to turn around after already driving hours and hiking miles to get there. Half dome's cables were never the danger by themselves. They're a good tool for a genuinely hostile stretch of granite. What kills people is what happens when that granite gets wet, when a storm builds faster than anyone expected, or when the effort of getting there makes turning back feel unthinkable. Recognizing the pattern is most of the fight. Check the forecast for the whole day, not just the morning. Treat any dark cloud on the horizon as your answer before it starts to rain. The mountain isn't going anywhere. And always remember, waiting for a better day has never killed anyone on Half Dome.